Hello and welcome to America's Forum right here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Our top story on the program right now, the calls from Russian President Vladimir Putin to put combat troops on high alert near the Ukrainian border. More specifically, Putin ordered a test of combat readiness for troops stationed in a region that touches the Ukraine's northern border as tensions continue to escalate in the strife-torn Eastern European country. The Wall Street Journal reported early today that the move comes as the situation deteriorates between Russia and the Ukraine, whose pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, was ousted by European-leaning protesters at the weekend following the violence, and a weekend that included violence in which more than 80 people were killed. Meanwhile, thousands of pro-Russia separatists and supporters of Ukraine's new leaders confronted each other Wednesday outside Crimea's regional parliament before a debate on the political upheaval that swept away former Ukrainian President Yanukovych. Crimea is the last remaining stronghold of the opposition to the new post-Yanukovych political order in Kiev. Ukraine's new leaders are voicing alarm over signs of separatism there, and there's also more trouble for the transition government, which has yet to take its seats in a new transition parliament as well. Joining me right now to discuss the situation with Russia, Putin, the Ukraine, David Patton, Newsmax Magazine senior editor, and former Congressman Alan West. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both with us.
Great.
We had those pictures that we were showing there of Putin leading one of these military exercises, which actually took place last year, right around this same time. But Alan, I guess things are different this time around.
Well, they're totally different. And, you know, as George Santayana said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It was Adolf Hitler back some time ago that said, you know, I have to protect the ethnic Germans, and that's why he wanted to go into the Sudetenland. And then we also had Putin who said, I have to protect ethnic Russians, and that's why he went to Germany. So the exact same thing is all set up once again. And, you know, if anyone believes that Vladimir Putin at this time is afraid of the United States of America and President Obama militarily, obviously they did not pay attention to the announcement that Chuck Hagel just made a couple of days ago. So, you know, he's looking at this as a great opportunity to flex my muscle. And he's being set up once again by this administration to hit the three-pointer.
David, what do you think here? Is this a more serious exercise, what we're hearing from Putin, or just some saber rattling that we should expect from a guy like this?
You know, John, it was a couple of days ago that President Obama came out and he said the Cold War is over, no one should confuse it. Well, apparently somebody forgot to send the memo to Vladimir Putin, because this looks like a tactic straight out of the old Soviet handbook. The question is, how serious are they? It was very interesting that this announcement came out through Interfax, the Russian, let's call it AP, Associated Press equivalent. So it came out through state media. The statement was made by the defense minister, all of which makes it look like this is very clearly intended to be a message. Is it more than that? Is it the beginning of something greater? That we don't know yet.
And so how will the White House play all this? I want to take a step back here and talk about what happened back in May of 2012. And while, of course, there are pro-Russian populations still in the Ukraine, there's also a lot of strong anti-Putin sentiment, not just in the Ukraine, but also in his home country as well. Let's take a look. This is not the right video, but we do have I think we have some other video. Folks might remember these massive protests we saw in the streets of Moscow back in May of 2010. Just this week, a Russian court convicted some folks who were accused of organizing those demonstrations, and those people who were sentenced by the Russian court now face prison sentences of up to 4 years. Now, we're talking about how this harkens back to the old Soviet era. You know, clearly what we witnessed during the fall of the Soviet Union is this hunger for freedom among the Russian population. That clearly still exists here. So maybe, guys, if I could play devil's advocate, maybe the White House is making the right move here, taking a step back and maybe making the decision to let Putin self-implode.
Well, this whole thing about leading from behind is what we call following in the military. And I think that when there is a vacuum that is created by a dearth of American leadership globally, this is what you're going to get as a response. This is not a time to sit back and think that Vladimir Putin is going to implode. We continue to, you know, erode the confidence that our allies have in us. And when you have people that are stepping up for liberty and freedom, you know, when Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, that gave an incredible encouragement to people that were behind this wall. I think the bold move that the Obama administration needs to come out and say, we're going to talk about bringing Ukraine into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Have them be a part of NATO.
Absolutely.
David, what do you think about that?
No, I'd be all for it. I think one of the mistakes the West has made is that they haven't really incorporated the Ukraine kind of assertively, aggressively into the West, and now we're in this situation where, once again, it's caught in between the two powers. What happens next with Putin The problem with the notion that, maybe he'll overplay his hand is that that's really not how authoritarian dictators work. If he begins to feel threatened, if he begins to feel that he's not secure, then that's when you can guarantee he's going to lash out, he's going to send in the military. It was also interesting that the head of their upper chamber, if you will say their Senate president, said just a couple of days ago that it is impossible that Russia would invade. And for someone other than Putin to make that definitive categorical promise that they won't invade, that suggests, could there be a crack in the Soviet leadership? If there is, then you can expect Putin to crack down, and it could end up being worse for the people in the Ukraine.
And the reason why we wanted to play that video of the previous protests is that I would say that things are different this time around, and if there is a crackdown from Putin, if he does turn off the gas before, the world is paying attention right now. They weren't paying as close of attention back in 2012.
But the point is, who is in position to do anything against him? That's the key aspect. And, once again, you're dealing with an authoritarian leader. You're dealing with a dictator. You're dealing with someone that said his greatest regret of the 20th century was the Soviet Union collapsing. So we know the type of guy that we're dealing with. And I think that he sees this as an opportunity. And when you look at the natural resources there, when you look at the natural gas that is there, this is something he's not willing to lose just willy-nilly. So he's going to make a play.
And where does Europe fit into all of this right now? I mean, this has been viewed as kind of a proxy problem between the United States and Russia, but really the impetus is on Europe to step in here.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the European Union should be doing what it can to reach out and bring Ukraine into the fold like we did with many of the other Eastern European countries. Putin has to understand that this is not a threat to him. This is not a threat to Russia. This is an opportunity for him to get on the right side of history with liberty and freedom and making sure that the destiny of the Ukrainian people is up to the Ukrainian people.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about that particular aspect as it relates to the United States and Europe, the European Union as well. Just recently, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has warned the West that they should not interfere with the situation. Lavrov, and I'm quoting him here, "It is dangerous and counterproductive to try and force upon Ukraine a choice on the principle you are either with us or against us." I don't think there was a coincidence on that choice of words right there coming from Lavrov.
No.
You heard President Bush say that right before the run-up to Iraq.
Absolutely, but I think that the choice for the people there in Ukraine is liberty and freedom or totalitarianism, and that's how we should turn that choice, those words around on him.
If I could jump in, John, one of the problems with the Euros is that Angela Merkel's having a big problem trying to convince Germans that they ought to bail out Spain,
right?
Let alone the Ukraine. So if America doesn't have a strong military, a strong assertive policy overseas to sort of tamp down some of this turmoil that we see overseas, if the Euros aren't willing to come in and bankroll them and help support them, then I would say that big Russian bear we saw at the end of the Olympics with the tear is going to start laughing instead.
And David brings up another great point. America is not in an economic situation either to help. I mean, and this is what happens when your economic security that is not, properly tied to your energy security and your national security is faltering as well. You
see how everything is so closely tied together. I hear the music. That means we probably have to take a step away for the break, guys. It's been a great conversation on the Ukraine. Al, we'll have you back momentarily to talk about the situation with this American POW, or is he really that, Bo Bergdahl? Of course, we want to hear from you about the situation in the Ukraine. What do you think about Russia's announcement that they're having combat troops put on high alert? We want to hear from you. Reach out to us on social media at JohnB_Newsmax or any of us here at the program at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. When we come right back, we'll have more with retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan West about Bo Bergdahl, the American POW, and also David Patton will be back with us to talk about these new tax proposals.